This is my first time recording a video in a while that's not even close to daylight hours, but you know what? I'm actually quite happy with my lighting. So with that said, the monarchy is rubbish. Apparently, well, I say apparently, one time somebody said to me, oh boy, the fact that you've got the word king in your name makes it seem like you might be some kind of traditionalist of sorts. Which, I don't know, I think that's a bit unfair, but let me just say for the record, the monarchy is rubbish. Abolish it. Get rid of it. No thank you. But moreover, there's just not really any good reason to have a monarchy. I just can't think of any situation where if you were starting a society from the ground up, you would say, okay, also let's have this random family that has, well, maybe political power, although in the UK not so much exactly political power, but certainly has money just afforded to them by the government, like some kind of not very universal at all basic income, and also not very basic. So not universal, not basic, but an income. And also we're all their subjects. You know, this society, we've got a good thing going, but the one thing it's really missing that would just, I think, really bring it together, really complete it, would be that we're all just by law subjects to this random family. Yeah, that seems like a great idea. Now you might say, but there is one positive to the royal family, and that is tradition. You know, tradition is nice, and so that's the reason lots of people will defend the royal family. Now, admittedly, the way I initially, discussed the positives of the royal family was you wouldn't, if you were just starting a society from the ground up, choose to have a royal family based on the obvious merits of having a royal family. But you could say, hey, that's an unfair imposition. The reality is that we have a royal family now. We don't enter into society in a vacuum. So we need to consider the fact that the royal family is established and therefore it is a tradition. And, on the surface, you could say, personally, I don't think it's a particularly convincing argument, but I'll try to substantiate that with two other points to consider. Firstly, I think it's worth noting that most traditions do have positives. A lot of the time when people say, the royal family is a tradition, they'll say, for example, Christmas. They'll say, well, are you going to abolish Christmas? Because Christmas is a tradition too. And for me personally, the way that I define a tradition is something which you only accept because it's the way things have always been done. Like, admittedly, that's not necessarily like a definition I use all the time, but in certain contexts when I talk about traditions, and especially when I talk about traditions being bad, I'm basically saying that it's something which you only do because it's the way it's always been done. But obviously, with, for example, Christmas, that's not really true because there's lots of benefits to Christmas. Most obviously, it makes intuitive sense that during the darkest, coldest time of the year, you would want to have a nice, bright celebration. And, I think people get excited about Christmas not just because it's a tradition. I think that's one reason why lots of other countries have, I guess there's also imperialism. But to be honest, if that's imperialism, I think a lot of countries are thinking, sign me up. This Christmas thing, it looks like a right lark. And they're right, it is. And I think that's the key point there. Like, most other traditions people talk about, whether it's marriage or whatever else, there is a reason why you could imagine this actually providing some kind of benefit to society. Of course, singing songs, people love singing songs. Like, Christmas just makes people happy. It's like, do people get happy from the royal family? And I mean, like, really substantively happy. You could say, I don't know, the princess looks nice when she gets married. Okay. But, like, is that really, like, a meaningful amount of happiness? Just saying, oh yeah, it's kind of nice, the wedding and the dresses and all that sort of stuff, compared to like Christmas, which is like this big thing. You get together with the family, you eat really good food, you share presents, you wear fun little outfits, you hang out. I don't know what I've already said. You watch the TV and stuff. Basically, you do loads of actually fun stuff at Christmas, and it's like it doesn't really compare to the royal family, which is also a tradition. But is there anything actually nice about it? I guess the point I'm making is that even when you look at other traditions like Christmas and things like that, you could imagine actually that even if you started with a society completely from scratch, you might come up with the idea, of inventing certain celebrations. You know, there's nothing, if somebody, you know, sure, you might not think of it, but for example, if I literally went back to, well, I say back to, again, this didn't actually exist, but if I was at the beginning of a new society, I could, I'm sure, rattle off every single major tradition, in terms of like holidays and stuff like that, in the UK, and make a case for it. I could say, you know, what about we have a nice celebration where we all watch horror movies, like scary movies. Obviously, if this was a pre-societal thing, they wouldn't know what movies are, but for some reason they do. So we all watch scary movies and we wear scary masks and stuff, and it's like about being spooky and scared. People go, oh yeah, I love it. You know, that's like a fun thing because, you know, we as humans get some enjoyment out of like the spookiness. And it's like, and we get sweets. People love sweets. It tastes good. You know, there's lots of like positive cases. It would not be hard, I think, like I say, to defend the entire calendar of festivities just based on, wouldn't it be nice to have this thing? Wouldn't it be nice to have a special day where we have fireworks and we all just hang around a fire and wouldn't that be a nice day? Wouldn't it be nice to have a day to remember people who have died in wars? You know, let's say when our society gets started, you know, people might start dying in wars. Let's have a day to remember that. People go, yeah, I think that is a good day. And then eventually, you know, I've said all of these great things and say, well, you know, we should have a calendar to mark different years. And what if when we start a new year, we have a little celebration there and we all stay up until 12 and, you know, like we count down the start of the new year. People say, yeah, that makes sense, you know, celebrating the coming of the new year. And also, what if we had a family that's in charge of everything and gets loads of money for no reason? Suddenly they're like, well, why would we have that? But the thing is, even if you were to try and scrape the bottom of the barrel for some kind of positive, you know, you really wanted to sell society on this idea of having a monarchy or a royal family, and you know, you really said, okay, you know what, well, nice dresses and you know, it's kind of I'm really, to be honest, like I'm actually struggling to even think of arguments to dismiss. I was going to say, for example, having a nice palace, but you can have a nice palace without having a royal family in it. So, you know, that's not a good... It's very difficult to actually think of good defences for the royal family. But let's suppose you really did somehow manage to find one. It wouldn't outweigh the tremendous negatives and costs of the royal family, because there are tremendous negatives and costs. Firstly, of course, there's the massive financial cost. And this is where I say that CGP Grey is rubbish. I think I remember that I actually criticised CGP Grey in a video quite a while ago. And basically what I said was that this was almost my exact words. I said this, like almost anything CGP Grey does that's more sophisticated than summarising a Wikipedia article, is wrong. Because that's genuinely my opinion. I think almost any time like CGP Grey has tried to actually provide some sort of analysis or insight that's more complicated than summarising a Wikipedia article, it's been wrong. And, you know, maybe I'm just more angry because of the pro-royal family propaganda, you know, which lied. But to be honest, I actually think there's other criticisms I have apart from that. But obviously the royal family one's the big one, where CGP Grey famously just spoke complete utter bollocks in trying to defend the royal family. And one of the things, of course, he did was massively understate the cost of the royal family. I think he said that they get a salary of £40 million a year, and that's it. That's the only cost of the royal family, which isn't really that much. But that's not true. Firstly, there is the fact that the cost of one-off events are not covered under this £40 million. And tell you what, the money for this can rack up. So, for example, weddings, funerals, things of that nature, the government pays for that. So I think, you know, it's considered like a state function. So the government pays for that. It's not as if the royal family gets their 40 million and that's their budget. No, if they want to have a wedding or something like that, no, the government just pays for that. So that's an extra cost. And I tell you what, lots of other people might want the government to pay for their weddings, but the government's not going to do it. For some reason, the royal family does. And guess what? You know, what are they paying for that with? They're paying for it with people's tax money. There's also, of course, security. The government has to pay for the royal family security. The royal family doesn't pay for their own security with the £40 million they get from the government. Isn't that funny? The other thing is lost taxes. Not only does the royal family get paid for by taxes, they don't pay taxes on the property that they own. So basically the royal family owns a variety of properties and they don't pay any tax on it. Whatever profit they make and stuff like that, it's not taxed. And by the way, I should point out the other thing, which is CGP Grey implies that the royal family handed over all of their properties to the government in exchange for the £40 million. That's not true. The royal family still owns quite substantial amounts of property that wasn't given over to the government. So basically on that property, they're not taxed. And the other thing is lost profits. Because the royal family owns lots of property in the UK by law, which is, basically modern day feudalism, because they own that stuff by law, it means that there's no competition. There's no incentive for them to actually try to be innovative or really actually push to make more money. And the result of that is that the property owned by the royal family, the businesses and industries owned by the royal family, dramatically underperform compared to other private ventures. Basically, quite simply put, the royal family, despite owning quite a large number of different businesses, are very bad business people, and they tend to make less money back than is standard for other industries and other businesses. And that means that not only do you not get any money that could be taxed from that, but also it's broadly more deleterious to the economy. And there is a strong argument that actually, if what the royal family legally owns, just by dint of the fact they're the royal family, were instead not owned by the royal family, or at least made kind of competitive, such that their ownership of it was not protected by law, then it would produce a greater yield, and that would produce a lot more money for the British economy. And again, it's one of the more hidden, but also quite substantial costs of having the royal family. Royal family costs money, and CGP Grey is an idiot or a liar. I'm not sure which one he's more of, but definitely, at least on the royal family, one of those two. The other thing I should mention briefly is tourism. No. First of all, this idea that the royal family is this big draw to the UK, I'm so sure that's not true, and people have kind of compared, for example, Buckingham Palace to the Louvre, which I think was a French palace. I think I'm right in saying the Louvre was a French palace. I don't know. Either way, the point is that whatever the French equivalent to Buckingham Palace is, it earns far more money, and of course it does because people can walk around it, right? The fact of the matter is, who wants to go? Here's the thing: looking at Buckingham Palace is something to do while you're in London, probably on your way to somewhere else, right? And I say that as someone for whom going to London isn't that much of an issue. I can get to London in 20 minutes on the fast train, and I have never even considered the possibility of just going to London to see Buckingham Palace. It's not massively interesting. And like I say, to be honest, yeah, if I were really wanting to do kind of a meaningful tour of London, yeah, I'd try to make sure that I stopped by Buckingham Palace, but it wouldn't be a substantial thing on the itinerary. And I don't think anything else to do with the royal family would be either. So basically, yeah, just on the surface, that's so obviously false. But the thing is, okay, even if it were true that the royal family was the main reason why Britain brought in tourists, that would be really awful and embarrassing and something that should be rectified. Even if you showed me, actually, the main reason people come to the UK is to just look at the reality, experience the reality of us having a royal family, I'd be like, oh wow, our tourism's like terrible. We've got all of these way more fantastic things, and people are coming to see the royal family. This needs to be fixed. Like, we've got so much interesting culture and history here, and somehow people are just coming to see this weird family. We've got a problem. Come on, get the Tourism for Britain advertisers on this. Let the world know that they don't need to be coming here just to see this strange family that's in charge, the head of state for some reason. There's much better stuff, and I'm firmly of the belief that actually there'd be more better stuff if we didn't have the royal family. And if you like, we can just, all the money that we make from getting rid of the monarchy, we can use to invest in things to make us have even more tourism. But I almost think that even getting rid of the monarchy itself would increase tourism, because suddenly you can have Buckingham Palace open all the time. That seems like a pretty big draw for tourists. Like I say, I wouldn't really consider the idea of going to London just to see Buckingham Palace, but in the UK we have these things called National Trust properties, which basically refers to this idea that there were large palaces basically built by people who, after kind of the feudalism ended and the UK became slightly more equal and slightly less oligarchical. Let's go with that. Oligarchical. Basically, lots of people who were very rich lost money and ended up, well, actually, to be fair, I mean, I'll give some of them credit. Some of them just gave up the houses out of almost the goodness of their hearts, because they were like, you know what, these houses, yeah, sure, I'll let people look around them. But generally speaking, the point is that lots of incredible mansions and manors in the UK were turned into public attractions, places you can go, and that's basically called the National Trust, is the term for it. And I have travelled decent lengths of time just to go see a National Trust property, upwards of an hour, just to go see a National Trust property, because it's really cool to walk around this incredible mansion that's like filled with, and I'm talking, not like modern whatever kind of mansions, like Georgian mansions with this just gold everywhere, and like the ceilings have got these works of art painted on them. That's really cool to look at. And yeah, definitely, if the Buckingham Palace, you could just walk around it and look at it, and it became more like a historical artifact of sorts to this former institution of the UK, it would be far more interesting than just being like, oh, that's where the Queen lives. That's not really that interesting, to be honest. I think things are always more interesting once they become historical. Just a few more quick negatives. One of them is just the intrinsic unfairness of it. It's a pretty obvious thing, but just the fact that some people, this family, gets £40 million a year from the government, while other people get nothing. For no reason. There's no reason why, there's no merit that the royal family have demonstrated that mean they get this money. Why don't you just give 400 people £100,000 a year? And I tell you what, I bet that would, they'd maybe make something of that. Just like pick random, like that would be a better system. Just pick a random, I can't remember how many people, 4,000 people. Is it 4,000 or 400? 400, I think. And just pick a random 400 people and just be like, you know what? You've won the little lottery. You get £100,000 a year. And I think that would be a better system, because, at least it would still kind of be unfair because it's arbitrary, but at least it's like everybody has a shot at it, rather than this system where it's like, this one family gets £40 million a year, and just by dint of having been born into that family, you're guaranteed this income from the state forever. Nobody can vote you out. It doesn't matter how rubbish you are. Nobody can fire you. No, you're just locked into it. And it's like, wow, that's totally against any semblance of fairness. boy, I guess we can't even like, I mean, I know that like meritocracies, well, first of all, we don't live anything close to meritocracy, and I think I'm willing to say that maybe a pure meritocracy is almost impossible. But like, boy, do you have to be so obvious about it? And yeah, obviously there's the fact that people are starving and stuff like that. But to be honest, like, even I can feel slighted about this. I wouldn't mind being randomly paid £40 million a year. Yeah, that sounds like fun. The reality is that if you're almost anybody other than the royal family, you basically have a case to feel like it's unfair that the royal family, I mean, to be honest, even if you are the royal family, you should be aware it's unfair that they just get £40 million for no reason. And of course, the other thing is the basic, essential anti-liberalism of being a subject rather than a citizen. It's not okay, really. I don't like it. I'm not saying it's something which horrendously bothers me, but it's something that bothers me quite a bit. I do feel like when I interact with Americans or in whatever reason, like engage with Americans, there's a sense of like, I'm just not saying I'm thinking about constantly, but occasionally I'll become aware of the fact that I am a subject while they are citizens, that I am subject to an individual. There is some individual to whom I am considered to be in subjection, and that's not true for Americans. And I don't like that one bit. I don't, I mean, and obviously I can say, well, it doesn't really mean anything. Sure, that by law, by dint of the fact that I'm a British citizen, I am also a subject of Her Majesty the Queen, but I don't like it. My fiance is American. I don't know if this was known. And something I have considered is the fact that for her, I think I'm right in saying that when she becomes a British citizen, she will, like I say, become by extension a subject of the Queen. And honestly, from her perspective, that would really put me off. If I knew that by marrying someone, it's like, oh, you can marry this person and become a subject of this random person. It's like, well, no, I don't. Obviously, you should still marry the person, like, love and all that. But like, what a raw deal that is. It's like, oh, you get to marry the person you love and also become in subjection to this random person you don't care about. So no, yeah. And the thing is, like, I don't think there's even a mechanism to legally repudiate your status as a subject. So I'm just stuck. I'm locked into it. I'm a subject, and if you're an American right now, or a lot of different Europeans, you aren't a subject. You're just a citizen. You're somebody who your sense of, your relationship to your government is based on quintessentially liberal principles of your government being beholden to represent you as a representative democracy, basically a social contract, if you like. Whereas for me, my relationship to my government is that my government represents the Queen, who is the head of state, and to whom I am a subject. And that's worse. So feel lucky if that's not you. Anyway, as good as those reasons are, they are not the subject of this video. The subject of this video is a different reason why I think the UK should abolish the monarchy, and that is that abolishing the monarchy will reduce the UK's soft power. So, for those who don't know, soft power is different from hard power. Hard power, when you talk about, so it's like an international relations thing, hard power is basically your ability to just go ham on another country. It's your army, that's what it is. If you have the ability to literally just invade another country, that is hard power. Soft power, on the other hand, is better described as influence. It's your alliances. It's also things like your cultural influence. And it's, of course, your international political influence. So you may not actually have a very large army, but if you can command lots of different countries' respect or attention, then that is a significant amount of power. For example, I guess you could say the Vatican City is a country with no hard power. The Vatican City would not do a good job, doesn't have an army, can't evade people, but a lot of soft power because it has the influence of being the Catholic Church. That's an example. And, you know, there are many examples. And of course, you can actually translate soft power to hard power. Say, for example, if you translated soft power into money and then maybe used money to try to increase your hard power, you know, there's a variety of ways you can turn soft power into hard power, which maybe you'd want to do, especially, you know, soft power can be insecure. But certainly the UK has a good amount of soft power. And one of the reasons for this is simply the cultural impact of the UK. Lots of people know about British culture. Like a huge number of people know about British culture. Like if a film's set in the past, just everyone speaks of English accents because that was just the accent people spoken in the past. Doesn't matter where they are. That's not true. But you know, a lot of the time people do. The English accent is kind of universal. And of course the English language is the universal language. I don't really need to sell you on the point that the UK has a lot of soft power. But one of the areas where the UK has a lot of soft power is, of course, a legacy of our hard power. We used to have the British Empire. And the British Empire, you know, there was a time where the UK could really go toe-to-toe with some big players because the UK had an empire, and from that they could source a decent amount of hard power. But nowadays, the UK doesn't have that. But what the UK does have is soft power via the Commonwealth, which is, of course, a list of countries that used to be part of the UK. Now, I'm making an assumption here, which is that power matters. Power on the global stage matters. And in some sense, you know, we would all love the idea of imagining a perfect world where you don't need power on the world stage. Where the world stage is just decided, or like the different international events, they're just resolved through some mechanism by which having power is of no advantage at all. But we don't live in that society, or that international society. The reality is that the world order is very much determined by power, and in that context, having power is kind of a good thing. I would also say, by the way, that having power is just fun. There's a reason why people like strategy games, you know. It's because it's fun to have power. And to be honest, like, you know, maybe that's not a good way to decide how the country should be run, but it's as good as any other way, really, isn't it? You know, basically, you want to sit there and just work out what's going to give you the highest point score at the end of the game of civilization. And one of those things you want to do is maximize your power. The other thing to consider is just that it's nice to be a relevant country. Like, I've just seen so many Italians complaining about people putting garlic in carbonara. And it's like, that's like my go-to example of if you want to see whether or not a country is just completely irrelevant on the world stage, look at how defensive they are about their cuisine. And it's like, if they're like, oh, you can't do that, you ruined this meal from my culture by not putting in this very specific ingredient and putting in this other ingredient instead. Like the Spanish who are like, Jamie Oliver, you disrespected Spain by putting chorizo in paella. Don't you know that that's not authentic, even though it tastes way better? Like, it's just, you can tell why. It's like, oh dear, I'm sorry that you used to have like an empire, and now you're literally just an irrelevant country, Spain. It's sad. I do genuinely feel sad for you. And I feel sad that you've been reduced to getting angry about people putting a sausage in your rice dish. I'm sorry that this is like a big deal to you. And I like the fact that I live in the UK, where I can just watch somebody completely butcher a British dish, and I think, oh, okay. Don't really care though, because, you know, Doctor Who. The point is, because the UK is not irrelevant on the world stage, we can spend our time focusing on other stuff without stressing out. Italians, you know, they're just, it's just a bit embarrassing, isn't it? You know, like the whole World War I thing, where they like did the whole thing where they like fought the same battle like 6 times and lost every single time, even though they were on the winning side. And then the whole thing of World War II, where they like basically had to become Germany's, you know, bum boy, whipping boy, whatever else you want. And then they like thought they were going to reform the Roman Empire, and then they literally had like And they tried to defeat Greece and they couldn't do it, and then Germany had to come bail them out, and then they lost in Africa, and then they like switched sides, and then like Germany just took over half their land, and just it's embarrassing, isn't it? And you feel sorry for them, and that's why when you see an Italian say, you put cream in carbonara, you put garlic in carbonara, you ruined it, and you're not supposed to put that many tomatoes in, or tomatoes, I don't know why I'd say tomatoes in bolognese, you've ruined it. And you say, you've got to remember, it's difficult for them. You might say to yourself, because if you're like from a country that actually matters on the world stage and actually, is relevant, then you might just sit there and be like, why does it matter? But you got to remember, this is like the only thing they can do. Like we've already established they can't actually, do anything meaningful to affect the world stage. Whenever they try to do that, they always flop embarrassingly. So the only thing they can do is just complain about what you're putting in your pasta. And, that's the thing. You look at that and it's like, from the perspective of a British person, it's like, it's staring into the abyss. Because it's like, oh God, what if the UK becomes irrelevant on the world stage? Might I ever become that sad and pathetic that I'm just like complaining about what people do to pasta on the internet? And the answer is maybe yeah. And that's pretty terrifying. And that's why, to me personally, it matters that I'm that the UK is relevant on the world stage. I need those bragging rights, I need to be able to say at the end of the day, the UK is a relevant global power. So there we go. The other reason, by the way, is also if you live in a democracy, then the country you live in being powerful essentially extends your own democratic influence. I mean, I know democracy is a big sham anyway, but like ultimately, in some ways it's a big scam, but it's not a total scam. That was kind of how I would explain democracy. And within that context, it's like, well, the fact that, I, as a British person, can, with my vote, influence the UK means I can, by extension, influence the world, which, makes me feel, like I have a greater influence. And obviously a lot of the time I'll just ignore you anyway and invade Iraq and kill loads of innocent people. And then you'll say, well, that was bad. But the point is, you'd rather have that, like, the thing is, it's like if you live in, I don't know, Czechoslovakia. No, Czechoslovakia doesn't exist. If you live in Slovakia, let's say, you don't sit there and think, I tell you what, this vote is really significant. Because, like, I mean, sure, it affects your country, but that doesn't really matter. Whereas, like, in America, for example, Americans, their vote matters on the world stage. Which is kind of terrifying when you consider how messed up America is. But the point is, like, I would rather have my vote matter more than matter less. And if you live in America, your vote matters a lot. Not on like an individual level, but like the American democratic process matters a lot because it influences the entire world stage because America is such a relevant power. Whereas, of course, if you live in Slovakia, your vote doesn't really matter very much because it doesn't influence the world stage. So there we go. I just feel like if you as an individual want to feel like you matter more to the world, that you affect something beyond yourself, you want to live in a country that's powerful. So why does having the monarchy reduce the UK's power, and specifically soft power? And it's because of actually the reason why I'm uploading this video when I'm uploading this video, which is that at the end of November, Barbados is going to get rid of Queen Elizabeth. She's not going to be their queen anymore. They're just going to have a president, I think. The point is they're getting rid of her. And the issue is that this makes the UK look bad. Which, basically, ultimately, soft power, it's perception, right? Like, if the UK looks powerful and looks large and in charge, then it is. But if the UK looks weak and looks, unappealing, then it is. And if you've got Barbados saying, nah, we don't need this thing tying us to the UK, we're getting rid of it, then that makes the UK look weaker. And it basically, if when the UK is relying so much on soft power, to have institutions that speak to your soft power slowly erode is not a good look. And the problem is that the UK has, through the monarchy and the global reach of the monarchy, attached its soft power to a very unappealing institution. And can you really blame Barbados for not wanting... Like, think about this. All the things I said about being a subject of the Queen, I say that as someone who at least lives, down the road from the Queen. She's not that far away from me. Imagine living in Australia and being legally the subject of the Queen. Boy, I would not want that one bit. No, thank you. That does not appeal to me. And I'm frankly shocked it has appealed to as many people outside the UK for as long as it has. But okay, Australia, they're basically a bunch of backwards racist hicks, aren't they? So it's not really surprising that they would hang on to... I do just like to insult countries, especially things I feel like I'm on a roll with the whole Italian thing. But to be fair, like Australians, they are like so racist. Like I say it as a joke, but also like seriously, they're just the most racist country in the world. Australians, like, boy, they really, I don't know, like, it's kind of, how like Australia is made up of convicts, like it's all of the criminals were deported to the UK. People like to complain about the idea that, like, we have hate crimes in the UK now and you can get arrested just for making a racist tweet or something. But you can only logically surmise that we must have had something like that in the 18th and 19th century, because somehow we managed to just deport an entire population of racists to a continent. Because Australia, I'm sorry. I mean, well, if you live in Australia, that's the thing, like, who am I offending? If you live in Australia and you're a fan of mine, you're probably just nodding in agreement right now, like, yeah, we are pretty racist. But by contrast, there are places like Canada and New Zealand. New Zealand in particular, places which are very progressive. Very much not Australia. Sometimes progressive in like a way which, doesn't appeal to me. For example, I think New Zealand have actually made a law now where they're giving amnesty to trans-identified people from the UK, which, great. And I can understand that lots of people don't like the Canadian government and New Zealand government. I think on balance, I might say that I would prefer them to our government. But I also don't really know lots about that. I really don't like what Trudeau did with the whole saying he was going to institute electoral reform and then not doing it. I think that was a pretty rubbish move on his part. But the point is, these are countries, Canada and New Zealand, which are, at least right now, broadly to the left of the UK. Insofar as there is a valid left-right spectrum, the UK has had a conservative government for the last 11 years. And we're going to possibly have one right up until 2024. So at the end of that, we're going to have had 14 years of conservative rule, which, interestingly, we had 13 years of Labour rule in 2010. So, it kind of works out. But basically, at this point, we're going to have 14 years of conservative rule in the UK, which speaks to the fact there is generally a right-wing thing. And obviously, we had Brexit, we had all of that. The UK is, like I say, insofar as there's a left-right thing that's really valid, the UK seems to be more on the right now. And then you contrast that to New Zealand and Canada. I mean, Trudeau, he just keeps getting elected, and sure, he's not like the most left, but he's to the left on quite a few significant areas. Obviously, if you're a socialist, I don't think you'd be a fan of Trudeau. And I like to make fun of him for his whole, like, he's a politician. He's basically Obama. He's like, says he's going to do stuff and then he doesn't do it. I feel mean, like, saying he's a politician, I feel like I'm letting off the hook. Politicians should be able to just do the things they say they'll do. And I think, to be honest, Trudeau's been particularly bad. My perception is Trudeau's been particularly bad at saying he'll do things, like, caring about the environment, electoral reform, whatever else, and then just not doing it. But certainly New Zealand also, very, very left-wing, very liberal, progressive, whatever else you want to call it. So here's my question. How long do you really think those people are going to tolerate a monarchy? Considering Barbados has already kind of like cottoned on to the fact that this is not a good thing. Like Barbados was like, hey, why should we have like this family that we're all subjects to? Do you really think that New Zealand and Canada aren't gonna, being a kind of broadly liberal progressive country, aren't gonna think to themselves, why do we have this thing too? And the point is, and this is a significant thing, the last country that's going to want to abolish the monarchy as things stand right now, you might think, is the UK, because at least we've got some association with the monarchy. Why would Canada and New Zealand really want to keep this institution around for that long? And my suggestion, my supposition, is that they won't. That eventually they're going to want to get rid of the monarchy. And then how will that make the UK look? I think the way that will be perceived is the UK becoming increasingly less relevant on the world stage as more countries and bigger countries that are right now under the subjection of the Queen begin to abandon and reject the monarchy. The more it's going to look like they are rejecting the UK, and that's going to make the UK look worse on the international scene. So what's the solution? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. The UK should make plans to abolish the monarchy after the death of Queen Elizabeth. I think that's like, by the way, I always think like people talk about abolishing the monarchy. I always feel like the better way to frame it is, should somebody take over after Queen Elizabeth? Because like that's ultimately a better, like I think people like Queen Elizabeth. She's been in charge for a while. But it's kind of like, I think the question of, should we then get King Charles or King William or anyone else? That's a different question. I think it's a question where people are more likely to be like, no, why should we? Why do I want to be subject to King Charles? So I think if the British government wanted to be smart, they would say, okay, we have a plan. Our plan is, after Queen Elizabeth dies, the monarchy goes with her. And then the UK starts styling itself as Republican, begins to say, okay, we will be a republic, and begins to actually form and forge a new identity as a republic, work towards that identity, and, this is the key thing, work towards that identity with the rest of the Commonwealth. And says, okay, Commonwealth, let's come together and talk about how we are going to transition into not having a monarchy anymore. And what this would mean is the UK would be taking a leading role in bringing the rest of the Commonwealth out of the monarchy. And the UK would be saying, okay, you know what? We are going to work out how we're going to deal with this thing. And it would mean that the UK wouldn't be left behind, because it's really hard not to just imagine a point in the future where, like I say, every other part of the Commonwealth has got rid of the monarchy, because I just think inevitably it's got to happen. Like, how long can New Zealand and Canada tolerate having a monarchy? I don't think it's going to be... I just think it's not going to be... I think it's going to be within my lifetime they're going to get rid of it. And you're just going to be left with the UK, maybe Australia, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if eventually a domino effect, Australia ends up getting rid of it. When the UK just has the monarchy and every other country has voted to get rid of it, how relevant do you think the UK is going to seem on the world stage at that point? Not very. Whereas if the UK says right now, okay, we're going to take the leadership role, and we're going to say, okay, this is basically how things are going to work without the monarchy. And, you could even kind of say, well, what form do we want the Commonwealth to actually take? Do we want the Commonwealth to actually adapt and change and maybe be a different type of institution? You could even look towards CANZUK. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK. You could actually start to work that stuff out. The point is, if it starts with the UK making a bold decision, it makes the UK look more powerful. It makes the UK look more strong. The UK right now looks very weak on the international stage, and it's, like I say, my civilization strategy game part of me that just wants to see countries actually do well and succeed gets very distressed when I look at what the UK is up to. I think, no, you make a strong decision, and then you say, okay, and I'm going to lead the rest of my buddies, and you take a leadership role. These are all things that will increase the UK's soft power, not just insulating against the inevitable loss of soft power when countries start to reject the monarchy. And I think already the UK has incurred a significant chink in the armour, if you like, by what's happened with Barbados. But we can insulate against further embarrassment by having countries increasingly disassociate with us. And we can actually, more than that, even begin to take a leadership role, and the UK could assert itself more so on the international scene. As I think, all of this is kind of in my head, like the back of my head's constantly saying, like, okay, Brexit's a really relevant context here, because there is the fact that the UK are like, there was this whole thing about the UK is going to be an international actor once we've got rid of the EU. It's like, it really just didn't happen. And it was just kind of embarrassing. Like, the UK just seems so irrelevant on the world stage now. And it's a bit disappointing. Anyway, so conclusion. I guess the main thing is that I was thinking about this when I saw Barbados was going to get rid of the monarchy. This was what I thought about. I thought, this symbolizes, or this shows how the monarchy is bad for the UK and bad for the UK's international power. That actually, when you have a backwards political system, it makes you look worse on the global stage and makes countries less likely to want to associate with you. And that's kind of why I came out with this video. I also wanted to drop some other reasons why I dislike the monarchy, so I did that. And that really leads to the big point, which is I just don't like the monarchy. I don't need to come up with any more reasons to dislike the monarchy than I already had, but I did. Oh goodness me, I really don't like living in a monarchy. It's rubbish. I said I didn't let the whole subject thing get to me, but it gets to me. It really does. I think it's because I'm like somebody who cares about language. I guess if you know me from which of course you do, like it'll be really interesting if there's somebody who doesn't actually like think of me with reference to my main channel and just thinks of me with reference to this channel. But I don't think I'm at that point yet, or if I'm ever going to get to that point. But presumably you all know me from my main channel, and therefore you should know that I'm somebody who has a strong sense of words should mean things, and when you talk with reference to words, you should people should understand the meaning of those words, if you get what I'm saying. And within that context, for me, I'm not like really willing to let the fact that I'm a subject just be an unacknowledged thing. It's like, no, the fact that that is actually a thing bothers me, and I'm not the kind of person who can just be like, oh, I'll just ignore it. I don't like it. It irritates me. And while I do call myself King Critical, or KC2 on this channel, King Critical the second, I guess, I don't want there to be a king, except for Jesus, King of all kings. Amen.